Hello, I'm Dr. Sidharth Ramesh, and this is the Digital Health Hackers podcast. And I'm here today with Dr. Raunak Pradhan. So, he's been a consultant with the National Health Authority of India, which has been working on the interoperability program here, ABDM, and a lot of other stuff. So, welcome, Dr. Raunak.
Hi Sidharth.
So, Dr. Raunak, how did you have a doctor in your name, so you do have a PhD. Can you tell me a bit about your background and how you got started with digital health?
Sure. I'm Raunak. From Raurkela in Odisha. So I did my bachelor's in biomedical engineering from NIT Raurkela, and during that time I was exposed to different internships at IIT Delhi and IIT Madras, where I was working on like neural network kind of algorithms, and then a bit on the devices side as well, in collaboration with AIMS. So I think that is where the whole idea of medical devices as an industry kind of piqued my interest, and from there, like I went on to do my PhD from Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. Why NTU Singapore? Because I had a few seniors there, and they spoke glowingly of the funding that and Singapore in general invests in healthcare and in research as well. So my intention of doing a PhD was primarily to kind of get into the medical devices space, build a device of my own, and see if I can commercialize it. So I was trying to build a device which could use RF and microwaves to be able to do neural stimulation and like reduce essentially pain in an individual. So that was broadly why I decided to kind of do go ahead and do my PhD from NTU. But during the time of PhD, I think Singapore as an ecosystem is very pro to startups and new innovations. So I think during my PhD, I realized that like I participated in a few hackathons conducted by Access Health and then MIT Hacking Medicine as well as the Stanford Biodesign program. So during that entire process, I went and spoke to a bunch of individuals who were working in this entire domain of like developing products for societal impact, right? And since I had a background in healthcare, that kind of led me naturally there. So I really enjoyed the process of like figuring out what problem to solve, how do you talk to customers, how do you validate a problem statement, and then how do you build a device, how do you build a solution on top of it, and how do you actually validate that solution and give it to the hands of the customer. So I think that is how my general interest towards building products in the digital space kind of came about. And since then I've been working with various like small scale, mid scale, and large scale startups as well, primarily in the domain of digital health.
Excellent. So, I think you have been part of the Stanford Biodesign program, right? So, I think a lot of our listeners here are in health IT, they are in digital health or like looking to go into digital health. So, what information can you provide about the Stanford Biodesign program? Like, how did you apply, and what was the process like once you got in? Was it worth it? What did you learn at the end of it? Can you tell me a little bit more?
Sure. So the Stanford Biodesign program primarily works on two models. One is say with Singapore, with Ireland, with Spain for a while. They were doing more of the classroom kind of model, which is like a 4 month 4 month program where people from different disciplines and different universities can kind of come to a common place. And the hosting agency, in case of Singapore, was A Star. They were doing a classroom program. So the fellows who actually go as a part of the main program, they come back and teach the same biodesign process to people in their respective countries. So I was a part of the classroom biodesign program, and then fellows who had essentially gone to like Singapore, gone to Stanford, like went there to immerse themselves in problem statements, figure out what statement to solve. The program ensures that there are people from different disciplines, say for example design, material science, engineering, business. It's a good mix of people from different disciplines who come together to kind of form a team and then dive deeper into the problem statements, immerse themselves in clinical surroundings to find problem statements, and then like follow a structured process to solving that problem. Once you identify, say, top 50 problem statements. How do you narrow down from the top 50 to like five using some frameworks of how easy is it to solve, how much time will it take, what skill sets do we have as a team, how feasible is it, what is the market size for that problem, who are the potential customers. So using a set of frameworks like that, people figure out the top five problems to solve, and from the top five, they essentially do a quick validation of essentially do a quick brainstorming and list down the top three solutions for each of those problem statements, and basis the team's inclination and basis the team's skill set, they decide what problem to solve. So once problem solving is done, people go down to solution design, like do a whiteboard brainstorming first, and then look at like how can they quickly build a POC of whatever they are trying to, or of the solution that they're proposing, right? And from there, once the POC is figured out, like they go make a business proposal, and then that business proposal is presented to investors and domain experts to get feedback, and then from there they raise the initial funding and then go on to build a device. So that is how the general process looks like for the Stanford Biodesign program.
Excellent. So, if somebody is looking to apply today, uh, what should they keep in mind before applying to, increase their chances of getting selected? Or is there even a screening criteria?
Yeah. So as I said, like different programs have different countries have different programs. So India used to run a AIM Stanford Biotech collaboration, which used to send fellows earlier. I'm not sure if that is very active there right now, but I think that got changed to School of International Biodesign, where people also go to Australia, Japan, Stanford. This is a mix of exposure from different countries which are building in healthcare. Uh, and I think so it's a very country specific program based on their tie up with Stanford. So anybody could go and essentially apply. There's a screening process which happens where people have to demonstrate some experience in healthcare, have had some background in healthcare, and then who are wanting to kind of a probably work on a challenging problem statement, and b wanting to start something of their own. I think these are the two primary things that are needed, and then every year basis the kind of people, basis the thematic areas, a group of people get selected who go to Stanford and then spend 6 months in Stanford, spend 9 months in Stanford, which includes immersion, solving a problem statement, and then doing a POC.
Excellent. I mean, that brings us to you've actually been solving real problems here in India now. Like now that you're back and you have been consulting and you've been working as a consultant with the National Health Authority, and you've been working on the uh, NDHM with then changed into ABDM. I think you have been there for a pretty long time, right? So how did it all start? Like, when did you initially get involved with the NHA?
Yeah, so I think my story started primarily with reading a lot about India Stack, which started off with Aadhaar and then UPI, account aggregator, OCAN, ONDC, ABDM. So these are all various parts of the entire India Stack, right? And there's a very famous slide, Rajni, which is an individual who essentially who wants to establish her own identity, who wants to get access to credit, who wants to be healthy, who wants to start her own enterprise and get easy access to credit for that. So I think that entire India Stack story kind of was very exciting for me. So from there I started reading more about what was happening in healthcare from an India Stack perspective. So that is where I think I came to know about the National Digital Health Blueprint, which was published by Niti Aayog in 2017, and like by then India had already solved the problem of Aadhaar and UPI to some extent, right? Like, so ensuring that every individual has an identity, every individual is able to easily open bank accounts and do interoperable transactions. So interoperability in its true sense was first established by UPI, where people realized that irrespective of you or me having a different bank account, all of us, by the virtue of the fact that we have a singular identity, we can use any of the applications and do transactions across banks, across applications, across banks. So I think the same learning kind of was carried forward to ABDM to say that in so similar to how UPS started, where the first step was always to kind of first explain the concept to people, get banks ready, once the banks were ready, they were able. Applications came on top of it, which is like the likes of Google Pay, Phone Pay. Applications came on top of it, which allowed the interoperability sharing to happen, and NPCI essentially hosted the entire switch in between, which was allowing interoperable bank transactions to happen. So I think reading about that, and then how NDHB, which is National Digital Health Blueprint, laid out the frameworks of ABDM. So I think from there itself I started reading about it, and when in 2020 ABDM launched its like soft pilot, primarily in the uh, seven union territories. So I think like I was at Bajaj Finserv Health as a senior product manager at that point of time, and I realized that because Bajaj was also trying to build their entire ecosystem at that point of time, I felt that it made a lot of sense for Bajaj to invest in it and for the team to start working on it, because at the end of the day, like applications or companies should do what they're good at, right? Like say for example, if Bajaj had to build a network of doctors, they could easily access that network of doctors via ABDM railroads. Similarly, if every individual anyway has a unique identity or a UHID across different systems, so Apollo has its own UHID, Manipal has its own UHID, different hospital chains, different labs have their own UHID. So I think the fact that if I could have a singular UHID, which is ABHA, Ayushman Bharat Health account, and then ensure that it is stamped across all systems, I could start getting all my digital health records at one place, which also then helps streamline the entire flow of claims or getting value added, getting value driven care, and as an individual ensuring that I'm able to take actions which make me healthier over a period of time, right? So I think when I started investing time with Bajaj, I also started contributing to ABDM from the outside, like going through the documentation, ensuring that people who are coming to integrate are able to understand the APIs. We're able to ensure interoperability happening. I think Briefcase, Karkinos, or Plus 91 are a few of the initial companies who started integrating with ABDM. I think from there, that sense of community kind of grew up, where we were helping each other figure out how ABDM. I think you have also been a part of that initial cohort of people with MedBlocks. So I think that ecosystem feeling was something which I was really looking forward to. So I think that is what made me start contributing towards ABDM, having learned from my own journey. And then, like I think an opportunity came along to help do that at an ecosystem level, which is how NHA happened. And yeah, that's been the journey so far.
Excellent, excellent, Dr. Raunak. And I think it's an understatement to say, like UPI as a technology, it's actually like revolutionary, because today I just went out of my home. I had to do a lot of shopping. I left my wallet at home. Like I was so confident that everybody accepts UPI and all the UPI networks are pretty stable now and everything just works. I leave my wallet at home. I don't even carry it anymore. Now, ABDM is being compared to the UPI of healthcare, and laying the information highway for healthcare so that it's as easy as UPI, right? So definitely a grand vision and a grand dream to work towards. But what have you seen so far? Like you have been part of the NHN, you've been working since the very early days. What have we achieved? Where are we at right now? And where are some places where we can maybe improve?
Yeah, so I think starting from the initial days, so I think first and foremost, when it comes to finance, because there is a regulator, say an RBI, and the number of entities are lesser, like even UPI took its own time, but then I think the fact that like there were lesser entities involved made it more simpler. Health in general is a bit more complicated, so I think that is the reason it is taking a bit of time. But I think from the point it started, like we've come a long way. Like if I talk about registries, so I think like close to 4 to 4.5 lakh doctors have already registered. Like close to 3.5 to 4 lakh facilities have already been registered. There are more than 200 companies who have already integrated with ABDM. There are close to 60 lakh Abhas formed, which is one third of the population of India, more than one third, in fact.
So
Similarly,
I think before we go into this, for a
yeah,
complete layperson who's
yeah.
listening to this, who has absolutely no idea what ABDM is, What should we tell them? Like, what is ABDM? What will it enable this person to do?
Yeah, so I think ABDM, if I have to break it down, the first is ABDM is giving common railroads which ensures that entities which are generating health data are able to like generate health data which they were anyway able to do, but also enabling them to access health data from outside and share health data outside in an interoperable manner. So I think that is step one. Step two, or probably step zero before that, is ensuring that all the healthcare stakeholders, which is a doctor, facility, labs, a hospital, individual, all of them have a digital identity, right? Which is Ayushman Bharat Health Account or Health Facility Registry ID, Health Professional Registry ID. So first step is ensuring everybody has a digital identity. Second is ensuring that the existing systems are able to upgrade themselves to ensure that they're able to receive data from outside and share data outside in an interoperable manner. Third is third is ensuring that the services which people are offering, say say if I had to book an appointment today at hospital A, and tomorrow if I have to go to book an appointment at hospital B, and initially like I had to go to visit the website of hospital A also, hospital B also, unless and until someone aggregated that service for me, right? What ABDM is allowing it to do is like doesn't matter if you have an aggregator or not. With your own application, you should be able to book an appointment at hospital A also and hospital B also via unified health interface, right? So that is third
Right.
piece, which is ensuring that democratization of service fulfillment is happening. And fourth is the fourth building block is around claims, which is to ensure that like irrespective, which is a part of service itself in a way, that irrespective of whichever hospital I go to, that hospital system should be able to file a claim and the patient should be able to get discharged immediately because all the data is digital. So that at a broad level is what ABDM is.
Excellent. So it's a mixture of a lot of different things, right? Like you have these registries, you have these health accounts for the patients, and there is the information highway to actually transmit the information properly. Then you have the how do I say, this has not been done that much in other places. So for people who have absolutely no idea, okay, so there is Ola, Uber, and all of these other taxi applications. I actually, for people in Bangalore, you might know this, but for people who don't, I use this app called Namma Yatri. Okay, so this is basically a complete peer-to-peer network where I can like book an auto, and it is always much faster than almost all of the ride-sharing apps, including Uber or Lyft. So how is this? So this is going to happen for healthcare with UHI, and which will then build on top of ABDM, right? So we'll have these different apps that are now able to, you can book your appointment without needing someone like Practo, and you can directly go through peer to peer, right? Has this idea been done before anywhere else in the world? Is this the first time someone is doing this?
Yeah, so I feel that like there are different countries again doing different kind of things. So NHS in the UK, for example, has done centralization of services, right? So they do centralization of services, but I feel that at a private ecosystem level, like ensuring that everybody is getting a level playground, I don't think it has, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think it has been done to that level yet. Like when there are public healthcare systems like the NHS or the Nordic countries, I think they anyway aggregate all the services, but it is one application. There are not multiple applications accessing the same set of services through common protocols.
Got it. So, I think the registries and the numbers seem very, definitely there seems to be adoption, right? Like the registries, we do have a lot of numbers. The number of ABA addresses being generated, we have a lot. And in fact, I think the government has now mandated most education institutes to have an ABA ID as well as other government centers. So, is information exchange happening? Where are we in the maturity model in terms of information exchange on ABDM?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to information exchange, the situation now is currently a lot more better as compared to what it was earlier. So I think like because none of the so FHIR, which is Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resource, is the standard that people have essentially, like India has essentially adopted, right, or is wanting to adopt in the near future. So I think the understanding of FHIR in itself in India was uh, not as much as it is in the US. So I think, like, because the kind of healthcare organizations in India are also, like, there are the big hospital chains who have their own IT systems, and then there are the very small, like hospital chains who may or may not have some sort of an IT system, and then there are the aggregator services in between, which are the likes of 1mg, Flipkart, and a bunch of these, right? So I think, like, the adoption of FHIR in itself is something which India is currently in the journey of, because that was never mandated, and we never had a precedence of insurance companies mandating that, like, FHIR protocols have to be followed, right? Because if you try and follow the value chain, like, insurance companies in India today just process PDFs, right? And they're just able to use data in whatever format it is coming. Uh, and in the healthcare in India is still very much driven by cash, by out-of-pocket expenditures. Insurance penetration is still very low. I think the Ayushman Bharat uh, Jan Arogya Yojana, which is the 5 lakh insurance scheme, like, that still leads to some sort of standardization among the public hospitals and among citizens for who are belong to the socioeconomic category. But then, uh, which is where it is somewhat centralized, but the entire value chain outside, no data is centralized anywhere. Like, I can call a TPA on the landline number, and he will like, ask me for the documents. I have to email him the documents, and that is how claims get processed. Because insurance companies had not mandated it, the process of FHIR itself has not been so straightforward. I think you also would also know quite a bit about it. So I think, like, but slowly and eventually, I think now integrators who are going out, or companies who are coming, are starting to understand the value of FHIR, and how simplified it can make their life as well, not just their life but also the patient life or whoever they are providing the service to. So I think as the adoption of FHIR picks up, the consent based data exchanges will become more and more standardized. So right now, I think government hospitals are a bit ahead of the curve as compared to the private ecosystems. So most of the government hospitals have started storing data digitally and have started sharing data. But private hospitals, like the private health tech companies, are still a bit ahead of the curve, which are more of the single doctor, single clinic kind of setups, being used by Eka Care, Plus 91, and a bunch of companies like that. But the bigger ones, which is like the Apollos and the Manipals, are still some time away, because for them, while everybody realizes the value of ABDM and how radical it can to provide better healthcare, but I think the nature of the nature of the organization, like, they're still a bit skeptical about sharing data outside and bunch of things like that. So I think those things will get solved over time, I think.
Right. So, I mean, as a doctor, I can only see the future where a patient walks into a hospital, a doctor is able to click like two buttons or not even anything. Like, it just automatically pulls all the records that is associated with this particular patient and just like shows them. Even if they are PDFs, just having that data there is extremely valuable, because right now it's scattered everywhere. The patient may not bring all these reports. Some of these may have been lost, but the way I'm seeing this pan out, right? Like, it's kind of like it's a opt-in, so the hospitals and the companies can decide to join this program and really enable this data sharing. That is, so what incentive is there for organizations to join in to this program today?
Yeah. So I think, to start off with, the government has launched something called as the Digital Health Incentive Scheme, which is 20 rupees per health record created, or like 5 rupees to the technology company who's enabling them, and 20 rupees to the facility who's essentially creating that health record. So I think that has seen decent traction since the last 1 year, and then I think now it is also getting extended for one more year. The government is laying out a budget of approximately 50 crores, if I'm not wrong, for entities to start digitizing health data. And second, I think, is like, sooner or later, as structured data starts flowing in the system, so I think companies will realize that it's say for example for insurance company, that becomes very simple to write rules and automate their entire claim process. For uh, for say hospitals, it ensures that they're able to track through the patient history a lot more better, and are able to provide much better value added services for a patient. It like having their past health history in a structured format also, like especially in case of chronic patients, help them see trends and analysis, and then take preventive actions accordingly, to ensure that like they're able to take care of their health better. And I think for the companies, because they eventually want to serve the patients, the more value added services they offer, using the structured data, the better their customer retention gets in a way.
Got it. So I think we are seeing this trend, right? Like in a lot of, for example, the US, the whole structured data and the reason for adopting EHRs and EMRs in the first place was just getting paid. And because that necessity was there. So in India, we are seeing this rollout where ABDM and the whole network and participation in the network is kind of voluntary right now. But soon, I think there are these other protocols that are catching up, right? Like UHI being one, NHCX being the other. So, do you think it will start becoming more of an insurance push rather than, people, right now they're volunteering, the government is paying them money to actually share these records? Will it soon start becoming more of, you are not going to get paid if you're not going to share this data in a structured format?
Yeah. So I feel that like because if you look at it technically, government is still the largest payer of healthcare in the country, right? So and like we know that healthcare in India, like anything happens, like people can directly fall below poverty line, because the rate at which healthcare expenditure in the country is increasing. Uh, that way, people are not getting, like the revenue cycles are not, they're not getting incentivized in that way in their workplaces, or they're not earning that way primarily. So I feel that like sooner or later, because of the fabric of our country, uh, like healthcare is supposed to be given by the state, or is supposed to be given by the insurer. So I think sooner or later, like the insurance use cases will start like predominating the need for healthcare systems to be digitized, because I feel that as uh, but I also see a trend where like people like us, in the or people in their 20s and 30s, them becoming more aware of their health. So right now, if I talk about it, like I have a smartwatch, right, and then I see that I do 10K steps or whatever, and like that today for me is just a dopamine effect, right? Beyond that, there's not much actionability of the data per se. So I think as more and more systems get digitized, these sort of data will also start becoming more actionable, where people will start taking their health seriously and do more preventive actions rather than reactive action. So I think as the systems get mature, like in the future, I think there are talks of medicine 3.0, like of how preventive health is more important than reactive medicine, because like today our entire healthcare system is very reactive, right? Like I feel something, I go to a doctor, or I take a medicine. I will like while there are a lot of people like us who are wanting to work out, who are wanting to ensure that we eat healthy, we stay mentally sane, like we are taking those actions. But I feel that as more and more data starts coming in, those sort of things will become all the more prominent.
I think so too. I think, the whole value based healthcare, for it to be established, we need a solid foundation of data, right? Like
Right.
without data, value based healthcare is not possible.
Right.
So, what are your next steps in making ABDM easier for the masses? Or how has it been going?
Yeah. So I think like a couple of things. One is uh, so as more and more as more and more companies are coming on, like I think one of the things, like with a larger team, and with more documentation, is to present to people like what is the value that they will get today or in the future by being a part of ABDM. I think so that is very fundamental for people to understand what's in it for ABDM, right? So that is, I think, step one. Step two is once they realize that this is what it is and this is how it is going to help my business or help my customers, the second step is ensuring that the current process essentially gets simplified. So I think like if I had to talk about an example from the payment industry, like earlier applications used to integrate with banks, and then there came application companies like Razorpay which simplified the entire process of integration by just giving an SDK, right? And like anybody could make a payment. All that you have to do is just plug and play the SDK and you are done, right? So I think with ABDM also we are trying to do something similar, which is like trying to come up with an ABDM wrapper, which simplifies the entire process of integration, and like abstracts out most of the complexities that is there in ABDM integration, and making it as simple as people as possible for people to essentially come and integrate. So I think like right now, like a few companies are integrating it, and we are trying to do a beta POC kind of a thing, and sooner or later, I think as more people start integrating and as NHA kind of also like validates the solution and kind of ratifies the solution, I think it should also like encourage more and more people to start using the solution as well.
Excellent. I think I can see this on the screen right now, which is the NHA ABDM's GitHub repo with the ABDM wrapper. So for people, is this something that companies wanting to integrate today, should they just check it out? Should they try this out? What
Yes.
do you? Yep.
What is more important is like right now to ensure that first people understand ABDM, and definitely they can take a look at it. It's built as a very simple solution with a Docker container. Right now they are built on the V2 version of the APIs, but like right now work is also ongoing to convert it into V3 version as well, so that people are there on the latest version of APIs as well. So people are free to check out and like apply through the sandbox process. So I think if I had to, so two or three things that this wrapper essentially helps you do. One is abstract out the entire FHIR related conversion and make it simple for people to convert to FHIR. That is one. Second is reduce the complexity of the APIs and give very simple APIs for people to integrate. So if you look at the entire Postman collections, I think you'll be able to see then get the entire Postman collection for both HIP and HIU. So HIP is health information provider and HIU is the health information user. So the entire consent flow is a combination of HIP and HIU. HIP is where you generate the data and then you have to share the data to any application asking for it. HIU is when you are trying to access the data from on your own application from any other provider. So so that both the APIs and everything is there. We have also provided sample HIP and HIU for you to understand how to integrate in your application, and all of it is essentially composed in the form of a Docker. So with retries mechanism and everything built. So yeah, so I think people are free to check out. But do wait for the latest version of the APIs. I think that is also work in progress and should be updated in a while. So with that, I think their entire integration process should get simplified quite a lot.
Excellent. And again, like it's Apache 2 license. I did see in the README how an API call looked like. I think if we can show that as well, they can get, like, okay, how does it look like? I mean, if you can scroll a little down to the README section. Okay, you do have a Swagger UI. Okay, great. Okay.
As well. So maybe I'll just show like, so first to essentially add set of patients. So the Docker essentially comes with a MongoDB as a part of it, uh, and then a JDK instance as well. So all that you have to do is install the Docker on your local environment, and then like all these APIs from your application to the local environment where this Docker is hosted. So, say for example, the first is ensuring that you're able to add a patient to the MongoDB, which stores all the information that is there, and then you essentially call the link care context API, which is facility to wrapper. So, in the V2 version of APIs, there were, I think it was a 7-step process, which we have now simplified to just a single API, right? Where you provide the Java address, the auth mode is demographics, you provide what type of document you're wanting to link, who is the patient, what is the reference number of the patient, and then the set of care context information. So with one step, your entire M2 process, which is linking care context, is essentially done. And now, once the linking care context is done, for the data transfer, the wrapper will essentially, because the wrapper is the one interacting with ABDM, the wrapper will call your API, and you have to just return the uh, yeah, you have to just return the data in a structured file format. So I'll just show that to you.
For those who don't know, there is a bunch of API calls that you have to make if you are calling the official government APIs. This is, I think, just having one API call here makes life much simpler.
Yeah. So here, this is the call that will come from the wrapper to you, which will tell this is the health information provider, this is the patient reference and the care context number. And against that, you provide the care context reference number and the entire FHIR format, the FHIR data in the stringified FHIR bundle. You can essentially just respond back in a synchronous manner to the same API. So this will ensure that the data transfer process is complete. So in a nutshell, the entire M2 process is essentially complete in two steps. One is linking the care context and then providing the FHIR bundle. Whenever the wrapper is asking the facility for the data, you convert it into the FHIR, you convert the data into FHIR and respond back in the health information request, right? And then a couple of other things which are a part of M2, which is the user discovery flow, where you discover the patient account if the data is not present in the wrapper. You get the care context of the given patient ID, you initiate the OTP, and you verify the OTP. So this completes your user discovery flow on the for the part of M2. This is also one of the test cases, which is the deep linking SMS, where you this is a straightforward API, so it's just a wrapper on top of that existing API. Similarly, if I talk about M3, which is the data fetching, so first you initiate a consent request. Against a consent request, you get the status of the consent request in this API, and once you submit a request to fetch health information, uh, once the data comes, it gets stored in the wrapper, and then this is an internal call again to get the data basis the request ID which came in this step, and you just provide the request ID, the status is accepted, and the decrypted health information bundle is essentially shared with you. uh, so this essentially completes your entire M3 process, uh, significantly simplified for an end user. And
Excellent.
this is the FHIR bundle that we spoke about, where depending on the type of health data that you want to generate, there's a standard JSON which asks you what type of document do you want to generate, with the patient details, with the practitioner details, organization details, what are the chief complaints in a standard JSON format, because people understand JSON while people have problems understanding FHIR. So we have built a tool which can essentially convert the data into FHIR and give you the exact FHIR, which then you can essentially use to store it in a system also and provide back as a part of the M2 workflow as well.
This is excellent. I mean, not only do you take care of encryption, decryption, which is itself a huge deal for most people, you're already doing that, and you also have the tools to kind of just take a simplified version and you take care of converting it to FHIR and so on, which is amazing. So for people who are interested, they just check out the link. I'll put that in the description down below as well. And if you have MongoDB running, you can already set this up and you can give it a try. I mean, this is great. Is there any idea for the government to take this and make this the official API instead of their API?
Right now, the NHA is also looking at these APIs and ensuring that we solve it from a scalability perspective. And I think once that gets sorted internally after internal tech review with the NHA team, because right now this is open source, so I think sooner or later we'll put this up in the documentation once it goes through all the internal checks from a scalability perspective.
Excellent. All right, Dr. Pradhan. So really great demo there, and it was an excellent explanation of everything that you've been doing so far. And for those interested, I will leave a link to the GitHub repo down in the description. You can check it out. And Dr. Raunak, anything else you want to share before we conclude?
Yeah, so I think just the general fact that I think more and more people should become a part of ABDM, because I think the ecosystem only gets stronger if everybody becomes a part of it, and ensuring that data is getting stored and getting shared in a digital manner. So yeah, I think look forward to more and more players kind of becoming a part of the ecosystem and happy to answer any queries or help in whatever capacity I can as well. I think
Yeah,
all for
thanks.
healthier, more digital and healthier ecosystem.
Of course, for sure. I think I'll leave a link to your bio as well in the description if someone wants to contact you. So, Dr. Raunak from a consultant for the NHA, and you can contact him if you have any queries or need help integrating with ABDM as well. Thanks a lot, Dr. Raunak.